My name is Clara and I'm 29 years old. Imagine sitting at the dinner table with your whole family, your parents smiling proudly at your sister, your relatives whispering in excitement, and then suddenly, your father slams down his fork and announces, "Clara, it's time for you to buy a mansion for your sister. She deserves it." At first, I thought it was a joke. I laughed nervously, looking around for some sign of sarcasm, but no one laughed. My mother's eyes were gleaming. My sister was smirking like she had already won the lottery, and every single pair of eyes turned toward me, expectant, demanding. My heart dropped into my stomach. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. "What do you mean? Buy her a mansion?" I asked, my voice trembling. My father leaned back in his chair and said it as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're the successful one, Clara. You make good money. Your sister is about to get married, and she deserves the kind of house that matches her worth. It's your duty as her sister." My sister, Sophie, didn't even flinch. She leaned forward and said, "Yes, Clara. It's the least you can do. After all, Mom and Dad gave you everything growing up. Now it's your turn to give back." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Growing up, Sophie had always been the favorite. She was the golden child, the one who got away with everything. If she wanted a new phone, my parents bought it. If she failed a class, they blamed the teacher. Meanwhile, I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But I never expected things to reach this level, demanding that I buy her a mansion. Before I go any further, if you want to see how this story unfolds, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more unbelievable family drama stories. Trust me, this one will leave you shocked. I sat frozen at the table, feeling everyone's eyes on me. I tried to laugh it off again. "I'm sorry, but I can't just buy a mansion. Do you know how much those cost?" My father's face darkened. "Don't play dumb, Clara. We know how much you earn. You've been working for years, traveling, living in that fancy apartment in the city. It's time you do something meaningful for the family. Sophie is your only sister." "Are you really that selfish?" Selfish. That word cut me like a knife. All my life I had been called responsible, dependable, the one who held everything together. And now, because I refused to throw away my life savings for Sophie's luxury, I was suddenly selfish. My mother chimed in, her voice dripping with guilt-tripping sweetness. "Darling, don't you want your sister to start her marriage in a beautiful home? Think of it as your wedding gift to her. You don't even have a husband or kids yet. What do you need the money for?" I felt my face burning. They weren't asking, they were expecting. It was already decided in their minds. Sophie sat there smiling like a queen waiting to be crowned. She didn't even look at me with gratitude, only entitlement. I tried to stay calm. "I love Sophie, but I can't afford to buy her a mansion. I'm saving for my future, for a home of my own, maybe even for a family one day." The silence that followed was suffocating. My father slammed his hand on the table. "Ungrateful child," he shouted. "We sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay us? Sophie deserves better than this. She's getting married into a respectable family, and you're embarrassing us in front of everyone." My hands were shaking under the table. I wanted to scream, to tell them how unfair this was. But my voice cracked as I whispered, "I'm sorry, but I won't do it." That's when Sophie leaned back and said something that broke me. "If you won't buy me a mansion, then maybe you don't deserve to be my sister anymore." The room went dead silent. My chest felt heavy, like all the air had been sucked out. My parents didn't defend me. They didn't scold her for being cruel. Instead, my mother nodded slowly and said, "Maybe Sophie is right. If you can't support this family, then perhaps you shouldn't call yourself part of it." I looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to speak up for me. But all I saw were judgmental stares, disappointment, and Sophie's smug smile. That night, I left the house without another word. My parents didn't stop me. They didn't even look at me. It was as if I had already been erased from the family. I drove home in tears, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles turned white. My whole body shook with anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. How could the people I had loved and supported my whole life discard me like trash over a house I didn't buy? That was the moment I realized something painful but true. Maybe my family never loved me for who I was. Maybe they only loved what I could provide. And that realization lit a fire inside me. Because if they thought I would stay silent, if they thought I would just crawl back and beg for forgiveness, they were wrong. The morning after that dinner, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. At first I thought maybe it was work. But when I opened my notifications, my heart dropped. It wasn't emails. It was messages from my extended family, some cousins, even an aunt I hadn't spoken to in years. How could you do this to your sister? Your parents are ashamed of you. Clara, you have the means. Why are you being so cruel? Message after message poured in, each one harsher than the last. My parents had wasted no time turning the whole family against me. They painted me as the selfish, greedy sister who abandoned her family when they needed her most. And of course, Sophie played the innocent victim, acting heartbroken and betrayed. I sat on my couch, shaking as I scrolled through the messages. Tears stung my eyes, but beneath the sadness was something darker. Rage. I had always been the responsible one. I helped pay bills when my parents were struggling. I bought groceries when Dad's hours got cut. I even helped Sophie with her tuition once, and she never paid me back. But none of that mattered now. One no erased years of sacrifice. Later that day, my mother called. Her tone was cold, calculated. Clara, your father and I have discussed this. If you refuse to buy the mansion, then you are no longer welcome in this family. Don't bother showing up at Sophie's wedding. We won't acknowledge you as our daughter anymore. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to scream, to beg, to reason, but I didn't. I just whispered, if that's how you feel, then I guess I have no family left. There was a pause. Then she hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. For weeks, I tried to go about my life. Work, friends, errands, it all felt hollow. Everywhere I went, I wondered if people knew, if they had heard the story twisted against me. At night, I cried into my pillow, mourning the family I thought I had, but the pain slowly transformed into clarity. If my family could cut me off so easily, maybe they weren't worth keeping. Maybe this was the freedom I never realized I needed. Still, I couldn't ignore the bitterness festering inside me. They had stolen my reputation in the family. They had painted me as a villain. And Sophie? She was basking in the glory of being the wronged little sister, while planning her dream wedding and apparently still expecting her mansion. One night, my best friend Emily came over with wine and takeout. She had been my rock through all of this. As I vented, Emily slammed her glass down. Clara, enough is enough. They don't deserve your tears. But if you want to get even, you know what to do, I frowned. What do you mean? She leaned closer, her eyes gleaming. You know all the skeletons in their closet. Your parents, your sister, they're not as perfect as they pretend. What if the rest of the family knew the truth? What if everyone saw the real Sophie? At first I hesitated. Revenge wasn't my style. I had always been the peacemaker, the one who tried to keep everything together. But Emily's words echoed in my mind long after she left. And slowly, a plan began to form. I started by gathering everything I knew. Sophie's little secrets, the credit card debt she had hidden, the time she cheated on her college exams, the fiancé she wasn't exactly faithful to. My parents' financial messes, their hypocrisy, the lies they told relatives to keep up appearances. Piece by piece, I collected the puzzle. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized just how rotten the foundation of my so-called perfect family really was. But I didn't just want to lash out. No, I wanted to be smart, strategic. I wanted them to feel the same humiliation and betrayal they had forced on me. So I waited. I kept my distance, ignored the hateful texts, and pretended to vanish from their world. All the while, I was preparing. The breaking point came a month later, when I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Not from my parents, of course. No, it was from a distant cousin who assumed I'd still be attending. And there it was, in shiny gold letters. You are invited to the wedding of Sophie and Daniel, to be held at the Grand Rosewood Estate. I nearly laughed out loud. An estate. My parents hadn't gotten the mansion they wanted from me, but clearly, they had scraped together some kind of luxury venue to keep up appearances, and that's when it hit me. This wedding would be my stage. If they wanted to humiliate me, if they wanted to disown me, fine. But I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I was going to make sure that on Sophie's perfect day, the truth would finally come crashing down. I told myself I wouldn't stoop to petty tricks. I told myself I didn't want to be the person who ruined someone else's happiness. But anger has a way of rewriting your rules. The more I thought about that smug smile on Sophie's face, about my parents' cold eyes as they disowned me, the more I wanted them to feel what I felt: humiliated, exposed, and powerless. Emily was the first person I told about the idea. We sat on my tiny balcony beneath a thin winter moon, and I let the plan tumble out of my mouth like a confession. She didn't blink. Instead, she grinned, dangerous, approving. "Make it elegant," she said. "Don't be crude. Make it impossible to ignore. Make it undeniable." So I made a list. Not the petty wish list my parents had for Sophie, but a careful list of facts: credit card statements showing Sophie's debt, screenshots of texts proving she'd lied about her job, a copy of the university transcript she'd tried to hide, and a handful of invoices that showed my parents' charitable donations were actually payments to offshore accounts for their social climbing friends. I recorded one voicemail from Sophie where she bragged about how easy it was to get Dad to buy her things. I printed copies, highlighted lines, and arranged them into a folder that felt heavier than its paper should have. But paper and rage wouldn't be enough. I needed a stage. I needed everyone present. The aunts who'd taunted me, the cousins who'd sent cruel messages, the relatives who'd enjoyed my erasure. The wedding invitation was my ticket. If I could get my voice in front of that crowd, I could change the story they'd accepted without question. That's where the surprise came in. I called the wedding planner posing as a distant cousin who wanted to contribute to the reception. I offered to make a family tribute video, a montage of photos and messages celebrating Sophie. It was the perfect cover, sentimental, harmless, and exactly what every planner loves. The woman on the phone was thrilled to have one less detail to worry about. She asked me to email content and assured me the video would be played right after dinner before speeches. Making the video felt like stepping into someone else's life. I picked childhood pictures, Sophie with ribbons in her hair, my parents at some open house event, and I layered them with captions. At first, the captions read like a normal tribute. To Sophie, our shining star. But then I edited the file, slipped in screenshots only I had, and underlaid the footage with the voicemail where Sophie laughed about never having to work for anything. I timed the slideshow so the screen would cut from a picture of Sophie smiling to a screenshot of her text to a creditor begging for an extension. When I exported the final file, it was a graceful little film that slowly turned a fairy tale montage into a public record. To make sure it played, Emily volunteered to be my inside person. She had a cousin working the DJ booth and promised to whisper a reminder to cue the video. Emily showed up 2 days before the wedding with a USB and the kind of calm that comes when you know somebody will do your dirty work. "You're going to feel better after this," she said, and I wanted to believe her. Even as I pushed forward, doubt throbbed at the edges of my plan. Was this malicious? Were there other ways to reclaim my life without dragging people through the mud? At 3 a.m, I sat with the folder and thought about forgiveness, the platitudes I'd repeated as a child to keep peace. And I wondered if revenge would actually fix anything. But then I read one of the many messages from my family again. "How could you do this to your sister?" It read like a verdict, and a verdict, I told myself, needed a response. The week of the wedding, I did something I'd never imagined I would. I sent an anonymous packet to Daniel's mother. I didn't sign the return address. I simply wrote the truth, concise, hard facts, nothing embellished, and enclosed copies of the most damning documents, the credit statements, the transcript, and the voicemail. I didn't want Daniel to be blindsided at the altar. I wanted the people making the union possible to have a choice. If Daniel's family decided to call off the wedding quietly, that would be their decision. If they ignored it, then the truth would be public with or without them. I felt sick after hitting send. For the first time in weeks, I questioned whether I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But the line had been crossed a long time ago, by the people who used me as a bank and a scapegoat. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake anymore. It was about reclaiming the narrative of my life. On the day of the wedding, I put on a dress that didn't belong in my wardrobe, something simple, neutral, and sat at a cafe across from the grand Rosewood estate. I watched as cars arrived, as floral arrangements were lugged inside and laughter spilled from the foyer. I felt small watching them through a window, but the folder in my bag felt like a promise I had to keep. When my phone buzzed, Emily's text was one word: now. My heart jumped into my throat. I took one breath, stood up, and walked into the room I hadn't been invited to, into the glow of chandeliers and the hum of people celebrating a dream I'd refused to buy. I was ready. The slideshow was cued, the room was full, and the truth was tonight's special feature. The moment I stepped inside the grand Rosewood estate, the air seemed heavier. The chandeliers glistened like icicles and laughter echoed across the ballroom. I stood near the doorway, my stomach churning, my pulse hammering against my skin. Every instinct told me to turn around, to leave before anyone noticed. But then I saw her, Sophie. She stood in the center of it all, draped in a gown that glittered like stars, smiling as if she were royalty. My parents hovered close, glowing with pride, greeting relatives, and basking in the attention. I froze, staring. That smug tilt of her chin was all it took to remind me why I was here. Emily spotted me and waved me over. She looked fearless, as though this was just another party. When I leaned in, she whispered, "DJ's ready. He'll hit play right after dinner. Just act like you belong here." I nodded, though my hands trembled. I wasn't sure if it was adrenaline or guilt. Dinner dragged on like a slow-motion nightmare. I sat at a table near the back, ignored by most guests. Some cousins shot me cold glances. Others whispered behind their napkins. The entire time, I focused on the silver USB in Emily's hand resting on the DJ's table. That little stick carried my entire plan. When dessert plates were cleared, the planner tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to speeches, we have a special family tribute for our beautiful bride, Sophie." My throat went dry. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered. Music swelled softly. At first, it looked exactly like a normal slideshow. Baby Sophie in her crib, Sophie with her first bike, Sophie at prom. People cooed and clapped, laughter rippling across the tables. My parents clasped hands, their faces radiant. Sophie beamed. Then came the shift. A picture of Sophie smiling at graduation dissolved into a screenshot of a failing grade. The cheerful music played on, but the room stilled. Next came a snapshot of her beaming at her first job interview, followed by a copy of a dismissal letter from her boss. Whispers started. My parents stiffened, and then came the voicemail. Sophie's voice loud and clear. "Daddy always buys me whatever I want. Why should I work? It's not like Clara deserves the money anyway." Gasps spread through the hall. The music stuttered to silence. On screen, the images switched faster now. Credit card bills, overdue notices, text messages to another man while she was dating Daniel. The carefully built illusion of Sophie's perfect life unraveled in front of hundreds of eyes. "Turn it off," my father bellowed, jumping from his seat. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Sophie's face drained of color. She clawed at her skirt like she could tear herself out of the moment. But it was too late. The damage was done. The slideshow ended with one last image. A family portrait, all of us together years ago, smiling as if we belonged to each other. Underneath, I had written one line in bold. "Sometimes the truth is the only gift left to give." The screen went black. Silence smothered the room, then the shouting began. Relatives demanded answers. Daniel's family whispered furiously among themselves. Daniel himself stood stiffly, his jaw clenched. His eyes locked on Sophie with a look that wasn't love anymore. It was suspicion, maybe even disgust. My father stormed toward me, his face red, veins bulging at his temples. "How dare you?" he roared. "You ruined everything. You evil, ungrateful child." But for the first time in my life, I didn't cower. I stood taller, my voice steady. "No, I didn't ruin anything." "You did. The moment you decided my only value was in what I could buy for you. You disowned me over a mansion, Dad. A mansion. This," I gestured toward the screen, "this was never my fault." He froze, sputtering, unable to find words. My mother reached him, grabbing his arm, her eyes darting around the crowd. She was terrified of losing face, but the damage was already done. Sophie stumbled toward Daniel, tears streaking her perfect makeup. "It's not true," she sobbed. "They're lies, all lies." But Daniel didn't comfort her. He pulled his arm away, his voice low but firm enough to cut through the noise. "We'll talk later, privately." His mother's glare told me exactly what privately meant, and for once, Sophie didn't look smug. She looked small. Emily found me in the chaos and slipped her arm through mine. "We should go," she whispered. "You've said enough." She was right. My heart raced, but I felt lighter than I had in months. My parents shouted after me, but I didn't turn back. I walked out of the estate, my heels clicking against marble, each step echoing louder than their voices. For the first time, I wasn't running away from my family. I was walking away with my head held high. That night, I sat in my apartment, watching the city lights flicker through my window. My phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, messages, accusations, some begging for explanations, others condemning me. But I didn't answer a single one, because for once I didn't need their approval. I had my truth, and deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. The fallout was only beginning. The morning after the wedding felt eerily quiet. I woke up to a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications exploded across the screen. Missed calls, voicemails, and texts. Some so venomous they made me sick to. Read, "You destroyed your sister's life. No, one will forgive you for this. You'll regret this for the rest of your life." But tucked between the threats were different kinds of messages, too. A cousin I barely spoke to wrote, "I didn't know all of this. Thank you for showing the truth." Another said, "I always suspected Sophie wasn't as perfect as your parents claimed. You were brave. It hit me then. My family was divided. Some despised me more than ever, but others, maybe they finally saw what I had been living through my entire life." Around noon, Emily barged in with coffee and bagels, practically glowing. "Clara, you should have seen their faces after you left," she said, dropping the bag on my counter. It was chaos. Half the guests were whispering, the other half were furious at your parents for hiding things. "And Sophie?" She was begging Daniel to stay. My stomach twisted. "And did he?" Emily shrugged. "For the night, maybe. But he didn't look like a man still in love. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he walked away for good." I pressed my hands to my temples. I thought exposing Sophie would feel satisfying, but instead I felt a storm inside me. Relief tangled with guilt, anger mixed with sorrow. Yes, they had disowned me. Yes, they deserved to face consequences. But Sophie's wedding day? Had I gone too far? Emily caught the look on my face and softened her tone. "Listen, they pushed you to the edge. They made you feel worthless. You didn't start this war, Clara. They did. You just finished it." Her words comforted me, but only for a moment. That evening, my father finally left a voicemail. His voice shook with rage. "Clara, you are no daughter of mine. After what you pulled, you are dead to us. Don't come near this family again." Then my mother's softer, trembling voice followed. "Why would you do this? You've ruined Sophie's future. I don't even recognize you anymore." I replayed the message 3 times, listening carefully. What struck me wasn't their anger. It was that not once did they say they loved me, or that they wanted to understand my side. It was all about Sophie. Always Sophie. That voicemail was my answer. There was no going back. 2 weeks later, gossip rippled through the extended family. The wedding had been called off. Daniel's parents, horrified by the debt and infidelity, had pulled their support. Sophie moved back in with my parents, humiliated. Did I feel bad? A part of me did. Sophie was my sister, after all. And a small voice inside me remembered the little girl she once was, the one I used to play dolls with, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But that little girl was gone. The Sophie I exposed was someone else entirely, selfish, entitled, and cruel. I also heard whispers that my parents were drowning in debt themselves. They had overextended to make Sophie's wedding flashy, counting on me to bail them out with that mansion. When I refused, their carefully constructed image collapsed. For the first time, I realized the power of stepping away. My absence created cracks that showed what had always been hidden. One night, as I sat journaling, I caught myself writing something surprising. Maybe this was never about revenge. Maybe it was about freedom, because in tearing down their lies, I had freed myself from them. I wasn't the obedient daughter anymore, the reliable scapegoat, the bank account they could guilt into opening. I was simply me, messy, hurt, imperfect, but finally in control of my own story. Emily read the line over my shoulder and smirked. "Freedom looks good on you," I smiled faintly. "It feels terrifying." "Terrifying is better than trapped," she reminded me. And she was right. But freedom doesn't erase scars. At night, I still dreamt of my mother's voice, the sting of my father's accusations, Sophie's betrayed sobs. Guilt lingered like smoke after a fire. And yet, beneath it all, there was something steadier. A calm I had never known before. For once, my life wasn't being dictated by their expectations. I could build my own future, my own happiness. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing with certainty. I wasn't disposable, and no matter how much they tried to erase me from their family, I had already written my own ending. For days, I thought the storm had passed. The wedding was off, the whispers had quieted, and I was beginning to breathe again. But trouble has a way of circling back. One evening, as I walked into my apartment building, I saw a figure sitting on the steps. My chest tightened when I realized it was Sophie. Her once perfect hair was limp, her makeup smeared, and her clothes wrinkled like she hadn't bothered to care. She looked up at me with eyes I barely recognized. Red, swollen, desperate. "Clara," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, we need to talk." Every instinct screamed to walk away. After everything she'd said and done, she didn't deserve even a minute of my time. But something about the way her hands shook made me pause. I crossed my arms. "Why are you here?" Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stood. "You ruined me. Daniel's gone. Mom and Dad barely leave the house. Everyone in the family thinks I'm a fraud. And it's all because of you." Her words cut, but not in the way she intended. Instead of guilt, I felt a surge of anger. "No, Sophie. It's because of you. I didn't create your lies. I just stopped protecting them. You did this to yourself." She flinched, her lips trembling. I didn't think they'd turn on me. I thought I could still get away with it." Like always, the honesty in her tone startled me. For once, she wasn't smirking or mocking. She was breaking. We ended up inside my apartment, sitting on opposite ends of the couch. The silence stretched until Sophie finally spoke. "Do you know why I hated you so much?" she asked quietly. "Because you were everything I wasn't. Responsible, independent. People respected you. Even when Mom and Dad favored me, I knew deep down you were stronger. And I couldn't stand it." Her confession hung in the air. For a moment I felt pity. But then I remembered the years of cruelty, the endless favoritism, the way she tried to strip me of dignity at that dinner table. I sighed. "Sophie, strength isn't about tearing people down. It's about facing your own mess. Until you learn that, nothing will change." She wiped her eyes, staring at her hands. "I don't know how to fix this. Daniel's family won't even speak to me. Mom and Dad are drowning in debt, and they keep saying you'll come back, that you'll forgive them and save us." A bitter laugh escaped my throat. "Save you? That's all I ever was to them, a lifeline. Not a daughter, not a sister. Just a wallet they could guilt into opening." Sophie looked at me then, her eyes wide, full of something I'd never seen before. fear. So you're really done? I met her gaze, steady and unshaking. Yes, I'm done. She left that night with no promises, no reconciliation. Just silence between us, thicker than ever. Part of me wondered if I'd regret it, but another part felt relief. For once, I had chosen myself. Days turned into weeks. I poured myself into work, into new friendships, into rediscovering who I was outside the shadow of my family. Emily was right. Terrifying was better than trapped. But then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived in the mail. The handwriting instantly recognizable. My mother's. My stomach twisted as I unfolded it. The words inside were shaky, uneven, as though written through tears. Clara, I don't know how to reach you anymore. I know you hate us. Maybe we deserve that. But I want you to know something. I always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it. Your father is angry, but even he is broken without you. Sophie is lost. Maybe we all are. I can't ask you to forgive us. I just hope one day you'll understand. I read the letter over and over, torn between rage and longing. Was it manipulation again? Or was it real? Could someone who had abandoned me so easily truly feel regret? I didn't have an answer. That night, Emily asked the question I had been avoiding. So, what now? Do you go back? Do you forgive them? I stared out at the city lights, thinking about the years of pain, the mansion demand, the disowning, the betrayal. And then I thought about the letter, about the faint glimmer of something I'd wanted all my life. Acknowledgement. Finally, I said, I don't know if I can forgive them. But I know I can't let them control me anymore. Forgiveness or not, my life belongs to me now. Emily smiled softly. That's enough. That's all you ever needed. And for the first time in months, I believed her. I don't know if I'll ever repair things with my family. Maybe one day, maybe never. But I do know this. I survived being cast out. I survived standing alone. And I found strength I never knew I had. Maybe freedom isn't about walking away forever. Maybe it's about walking away until you know you can return without losing yourself again. And whether they ever accept me back or not, I'm no longer afraid, because I finally know my worth.